Hey everybody, I wanted to do a quick short video on writing conclusions. Right, since this is sort of the last bit of the essay. Um, okay, here we go. So the idea is, and this goes along with my idea about the introduction. Remember, the introduction sort of starts very broad and narrows to your thesis. So then what's happening in the conclusion is you're sort of starting narrow, like us with something specific, like the last point that you just made, and then you're broadening it out again so that you end sort of with generalized with a statement about the subject, or I mean it could be like a prediction, it could be a warning, it could be suggestions for the future. Those are all things that you can sort of end with, but those are the broad ideas. So that's the same idea, right? You're sort of, I mean, it's the opposite of a introduction. um, so a final analysis or interpretation of the paper, right? So you're restating the thesis and some of your main ideas. You're not just, you know, wording them exactly the same, like repeating them. You sort of don't want to do that. Okay, so I tried to, in this slide, here we go. Functions of, I tried to highlight the main good points in this. Um, okay, so the functions of conclusions. First is you're revisiting your main claims. I mean, revisiting the claim that you made, and also the supporting arguments. Um, so you're trying to put those in there, remind people what those were. The first thing you talk about, second, third, so on. Um, the second idea is that you're trying to make sure that the grounds, they're calling them claims, but like the supporting arguments that you make, you're proving how they relate back to your main thesis, right? So you have your main thesis and you're trying to make that connection clear for people. Um, and then you're trying to just show that you understand, or you're trying to convey that you've understood the topic, like your engagement. You don't want to say things like, I've learned a lot from this. You don't want any of that. You want to communicate that you understand the subject more, right? Without sort of saying that, because, that's just not as credible. Um, I have strong conclusion in general can leave the professor with a good last impression of your writing. So this is one of those tricks where, it's like a really crappy movie, and then they have like incredible ending, and people walk out of the movie theater being like, "Oh, that was a pretty good movie," even though most of the movie was crap. I'm not saying it's good to have your essay be crappy, but the idea is the conclusion is the last thing that anybody sort of recalls or what they remember most. So you're striving to try to make sure you leave a strong impression that you know what you're talking about, that you've proved your argument, and that your subject matters. That's essentially the game. Okay, so tips for strong conclusion. I just highlighted a few of them, right? So make a reverse outline. This is what I was talking about. And there's an outline that I put in module 5. You can find it. Making a reverse outline just means you look through your essay and you're basically, you know, deciding like what you're missing in comparison to the outline, right? So my first main topic, my topic sentence, evidence. Do I have evidence for that? Um, do I fully explain it? Do I cite it? Whatever. And so you're just sort of going through. That's what the reverse outline is. You're Instead of making an outline and then writing your draft, this is the writing your draft and then figuring out how it connects to the outline and what you might be missing. So that's what that's about. So synthesize and not summarize. So the idea is you don't want to just try to give a summary of what you've been talking about. You want to present it in a way that makes it um, sort of like you've put things together, like you've made connections. That's the goal of this. You don't just summarize what the subject is. You're try to show that you've made connections between your main ideas, your main arguments, and the thesis in general, and the evidence. So you're trying to demonstrate that you've made connections between them, and those connections should help your argument, be strong. Um, can you bring in other material? So when you're doing your draft, right, you have your sources and everything, but you're just trying to think, are there other outside things that I need? Basically, if do you need other sources? Are you missing, do you have, you're making part of an argument, but you don't have any evidence, and where can you get it? Um, So you're trying to, think about that. They're trying to make the point that you might think about sources you wouldn't normally think about, like the textbook, if there's a way you could use that, um, which would be interesting. I wonder if there are, because I'm not sure if there are, but you might want to look, see if there are some of those short essays. You know, those might be interesting if you were able to use those. Eliminate doubt. So this is about language, trying to just present your case without hedging at all, right? So avoid phrases like, of course, this is not the only, or of course, there are other perspectives on, you're not interested in this. You're ending with your perspective. The only time you mention the other side is to say, here's what the other side thinks about this, and this is why they're wrong. So that's the eliminate doubt part. Um, and then you never really want to refer, says they call them unspecific placeholders. Like you don't want to refer to the actual essay, right? The arguments above, this essay has tried to show, or the examples mentioned throughout, you never want to refer to the actual essay itself, or the examples, or the evidence, right? You're presenting them, they're standing on their own, is the idea behind it. Well, and this one I'll put, so what we have here is sort of like 3 examples of conclusions, and then characteristics of a bad conclusion, of an adequate conclusion, and of a good conclusion. I'll call this the conclusion game. I will post this in module 5 also if you want to take a look at it. So all you're doing is reading through these 3 different conclusions, and you're trying to decide which one's the bad one, which one's adequate, and which one's actually good. And so the last bit of this is you're trying to make one of the techniques, and I mentioned this in some other place, but the idea is that you're trying to echo what happened in the introduction. Like, so this is a good way to make, and it can be at the beginning of your conclusion. It can be at the end of your conclusion. Probably the end would be solid, but who knows? Meaning you're just trying to like specifically call back or connect to what the introduction did. Right. So did you tell an anecdote? Because you don't want to tell a personal anecdote. See, that's what's good. Like, did you tell a story of somebody? Larry was a 35-year-old machine worker who started on social media and then whatever. Right. So if you did, bring that story back, right? Refer to it again and then sort of explain it in this new context. You can use a quote. So like if you quoted somebody famous, right, you could bring up the person's name, right? So if I quote Maya Angelou and give something that she wrote, then I can at the end be like, you know, as Maya Angelou was trying to tell us, or was, something. I call that back. It makes it a tighter essay. You can also make a suggestion or a prediction at the end. So, but the key is you want to connect with something, even use maybe some similar language or some example with your hook and the conclusion. And that ought to help you write a solid conclusion.